Chosen one, this person who betrayed and conspired against you has just realized you were their soulmate, and they are deeply sad, drowning in a devastation they cannot escape. While you are out here becoming more alive and powerful than ever, they are trapped in a constant mental replay of the moment they chose to burn down your loyalty instead of tending to it. You were guided to this truth right now because the universe is closing the door on that painful chapter, ensuring that while they remain haunted by the ghost of what they destroyed, you are free to walk into a life where your value is finally mirrored and celebrated. There was a version of you not so long ago who was already on the move. You were healing. You were sensing that something significant was about to shift. You could feel it building beneath the surface, your energy clarifying, your sense of self sharpening, your life moving into a momentum that felt genuinely and specifically yours. The forward motion felt right. Something that had been building quietly for a long time was about to break through. That was the exact moment this person appeared. Haute to tone, I need you to notice that timing, because it was not accidental. People who operate from fear and unhealed wounding carry a specific kind of radar. They can feel when someone powerful is coming fully online, and they are drawn toward that power, the way a person lost in the cold is drawn toward warmth, not to appreciate it, not to contribute to it, but to press as close as possible and take as much of it as they can hold. This person came in with everything calibrated to disarm you. They were warm, they were present, they were magnetic in a way that felt almost destined. They said the things that landed exactly where you needed them to land. They appeared to see the parts of you that others had glossed over or missed entirely, and in doing so, they created a feeling you had not felt in a long time, the feeling of being genuinely witnessed, of someone finally arriving who could hold the full weight of who you are without flinching. Something in you exhaled, something that had been braced and guarded for a long time finally released. Quadrock. That exhale was the opening they were waiting for. Now here is what I need you to understand about the depth of the connection, because dismissing it entirely would be dishonest. What you felt was real. The pull between you carried layers. It carried something that felt older than this moment, older than this version of your life, an almost cellular recognition, as though some part of you already knew this person before the knowing should have been possible. That sense of ancient familiarity was not your imagination. Soul-level connections are real, and this was one. But a soul connection is not a safety guarantee. It is not a promise that the person on the other side of it has done the work required to deserve you. Some connections arrive to complete something unfinished, to give you the opportunity to finally choose differently than you have chosen before. And what you were being invited to choose this time was yourself, your clarity over their chaos, your growth over the weight of their stagnation, your future over the pull of a past that was never going to take you where you needed to go. Here is the thing to hold on to, because it matters for everything that comes later. Real chemistry and genuine divine alignment are not the same thing, and learning to tell the difference between them is the entire lesson this season was designed to teach you. The shift was quiet at first, not the kind that announces itself through a single dramatic event, but the kind that accumulates at the edges. The warmth that had been so constant became unpredictable. The presence that had felt so full became intermittent. The person who had made you feel so completely seen began doing something far more subtle and far more damaging. They started making you question the seeing itself. They made you wonder whether what you had felt was real or whether you had constructed it out of your own longing. They kept themselves just close enough to prevent you from leaving and just far enough to keep you perpetually reaching. You Sanif that. That is a deliberate architecture, and its name is control. Here is what they understood about you that you had not yet fully claimed for yourself. Your energy is extraordinary, not ordinary extraordinary. but specifically rare. The depth of care you carry, the quality of love you offer, the way your presence shifts the atmosphere of any situation you enter. They had tasted what it felt like to be in the full current of that energy. They were not willing to lose access to it, but they were equally unwilling, or simply unable, to do what it genuinely takes to deserve it. So instead of rising to meet you, they began the slow, deliberate work of pulling you down to a level they could manage. It started small. There was a comment that made you second-guess what you knew. There was a moment where your instinct was accurate, and they convinced you it was not. There was a repeated pattern of cooling off precisely when you had been most open, most vulnerable, most fully yourself. With each repetition, something in you quietly recalibrated. You learned to hold back a little more before speaking. You learned to check yourself before feeling something too fully. You learned to offer a smaller, more careful version of your presence, just to avoid the unpredictability of their reaction. You adapted because you are intelligent and empathetic, and you genuinely wanted this to work. You bent a little, and then you bent further, and then further still, until one day you caught your own reflection and realized the version looking back was quieter than you used to be, more cautious, less lit up from the inside. Thought, the Buchan Broaderwood, that was you being eroded on purpose. If you recognized yourself in this message, hype this video to guide other chosen ones to this truth. Torsoth, the erosion was targeted, not random. They were not just generically difficult to be around. They were specifically difficult in the areas where you were most powerfully yourself, your intuition, your ability to read a situation with precision, your creative and spiritual awareness, your capacity to see through surfaces into what is actually happening beneath them. These were the exact qualities they worked on, because these were the exact qualities that threatened their ability to operate around you unchecked. Someone running a long game of manipulation cannot afford to be around someone who sees clearly. Your clarity was not just inconvenient for them, it was an existential threat to the entire dynamic they were trying to maintain. So they worked on dismantling it, labeling your instincts as paranoia, framing your sensitivity as a problem, dismissing your awareness as irrationality. They were not offering you feedback. They were performing surgery, trying to cut away the very things that made you impossible to permanently deceive. They made progress for a season, but they could not go deep enough, because what they were trying to remove was not a personality trait. It was the foundation of your soul, and a soul cannot be extracted from the person it inhabits. While you were adapting, trying harder, and pouring more of yourself into making this work, while you were genuinely and wholeheartedly attempting to close the distance between you and the warmth this person had shown you in the beginning, they were not doing the same thing. They were doing the opposite. Behind your back, they were talking about you to people who had no business knowing anything about your life. They took the private, sacred things you had shared in your most unguarded moments and circulated them as leverage. Quietly and methodically, they were constructing a version of your character that served their interests, a version designed to make certain doors harder for you to open, to ensure that the people whose opinions mattered were primed with a distorted picture of who you were before you ever had the chance to show them the truth yourself. Think back to the periods when you were closest to a real breakthrough, a professional leap, a creative surge, a period of genuine momentum, and something derailed it. Think about when a door you fully expected to open stayed shut for no clear reason, when forward movement that should have been natural hit an invisible wall, when a heaviness settled over your life that had no logical origin, when your natural luck seemed to go completely dry. That luck had always run beneath your life like a current, and then it simply stopped. That was not fate working against you. That was deliberate interference. The emotional chaos this person maintained around you was not accidental. The confusion they kept you cycling through was not a byproduct of their own unresolved damage. It was a mechanism. A person who is perpetually occupied with trying to understand why a connection keeps destabilizing cannot simultaneously build the life that is waiting for them. You were being kept too emotionally consumed to gain any real ground. And here is the piece that makes it a genuine conspiracy, rather than simply a toxic dynamic. They were not operating alone. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random, and if you're paying attention you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. You've also noticed something else. A lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have gone quiet. Videos removed. Voices pushed off the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine. And when you join, you're not just supporting your favorite channels, you're also fueling your own rise. It's a 360 win. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. Wedging nothing. The beauty is you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. That Finbarn. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $7 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. Thokal Wadjuanda, there was someone else involved, a companion, a confidant, someone who knew exactly what was being done and either actively encouraged it or quietly enabled it. Whether that support came from another person in their life or from a pattern so deeply embedded in their own psychology that it functioned like a second voice driving their choices, two forces were working on this together, and they had been coordinating longer than you knew. The betrayal had architecture. There was a phase of information gathering, where everything you shared, your vulnerabilities, your history, your dreams, your fears, was catalogued, not to support you, but to identify exactly where you were most exposed. Then there was a phase of misdirection, where that information was used to keep you looking inward at yourself, rather than outward at what was being done to you. And then there is the phase you are in now, where the full picture is assembling itself, where the truth is arriving through channels you did not expect, and where the confusion of the previous season is crystallizing into something undeniable. This is the phase they feared most, because this is the phase where you stop asking questions about them and start seeing clear answers about yourself. At some point, and it may not have felt dramatic when it actually happened, you made a choice. It might have been quiet. It might have been a morning when you woke up and something fundamental had shifted inside you, a tiredness that went far deeper than the physical, a bone-level recognition that the person you were becoming inside this dynamic was someone you did not recognize and could not respect. You understood that no amount of effort, no amount of love, and no amount of adjusting yourself to fit a shape that was never meant for you was going to close the gap between who you were in this connection and who you actually are. Wantritadan sometime that you eyed up and no be the man in you side and a kesting, not was nogaranax, and that stolen, not cleanly, not once and done. You may have circled back, you may have doubted, you may have had moments when the pull of the familiar was so strong you almost reversed the decision entirely. That is not weakness. That is the reality of breaking a connection that operates at a soul level. It does not snap. It releases slowly, one layer at a time, until the last one finally lets go. The pathway, but the direction of your movement changed, and that is the only thing that matters. You stopped orienting toward them and started orienting toward yourself. The moment that internal compass shifted, everything in the unseen world responded. The forces that had been working on your behalf, blocked from acting fully while you were still choosing to stay in range of what was harming you, were suddenly free to move. The relationships that fell away in the aftermath were not losses, they were clearances. The opportunities that did not materialize during that season were not rejections, they were redirections. Every door that closed behind you as you walked forward was the universe ensuring you could not backtrack into what you had just escaped. And then the truth began surfacing, not in one clean revelation, but in accumulating pieces, a conversation, a moment of sudden clarity, information arriving through an unexpected channel, the slow assembly of a picture you had not been able to see while you were standing too close to it. The full scope of what had been happening, the conspiracy, the interference, the deliberate and sustained effort to keep you small and dependent and confused, came into focus. And instead of collapsing, which was the intended outcome, which was what the entire architecture of their plan required you to do, you stood straighter. Truth releases you from the weight of an explanation you have been carrying for someone else's behavior. The moment you knew fully and completely, the mechanism stopped working. Their plan required your confusion. The instant you replaced confusion with clarity, the engine powering the whole thing went cold, not gradually, immediately, and the consequences that have since arrived for them are the direct result of that moment, the moment you stopped being confused and started being clear. There was a wound that existed before this person arrived. It was not created by them, it was found by them, and the distinction matters enormously, because understanding it is what permanently closes the door they used to walk through. Go further back than this connection. Go back to the earliest experiences that shaped your understanding of what love looks like, the way affection was given and withheld, the way safety was something you had to earn rather than something you were simply allowed to inhabit, the way a younger version of you learned to interpret silence and distance and unpredictability. That younger version of you absorbed those things as information about your own worth, rather than as information about the limitations of the person in front of you. Something in that early landscape gave you a blueprint. It became a map of what intimate connection feels like from the inside. And because that map was drawn during a period when you had no capacity to question it and no framework to recognize that what you were being shown was incomplete, it became your baseline, the familiar shape of love, even when that shape was not one that actually loved you well. Someone like this person, someone who needs access to another person's energy in order to feel powerful, someone who requires a particular dynamic to sustain their sense of control, has a specific talent for finding that blueprint in others and matching it precisely in the beginning. The opening warmth, the manufactured closeness, the feeling of finally being seen, all of it was calibrated to fit the exact shape of what you had been taught to recognize as love. That is not your fault. It is how early wounding operates. It does not announce itself. It simply makes certain dynamics feel familiar, and familiar things feel safe, even when they are not. The moment you turned and actually looked at that old pain, the moment you stopped managing it by staying busy and sat down directly in front of it and named it clearly, that was the moment this person lost their key. Access to you required that wound to remain unexamined. Access required you to keep translating their behavior through a lens shaped by your earliest experiences of conditional love. The instant you picked up a new lens, the translation stopped working. What they were doing stopped feeling like love. It started looking exactly like what it was. When you healed that wound, you did not just remove one person's access to you. You permanently changed the signal you broadcast. Before, something in your energy communicated a kind of availability for the dynamic that had been harming you. After, that signal was gone completely. Anyone calibrated to exploit that particular vulnerability lost the ability to locate you inside it. You became unreachable in the specific way that matters most, not because you shut down or armored yourself or stopped loving with depth, but because the thing they were using as a door no longer existed. You had rebuilt that part of yourself with something they do not have the tools to dismantle. That is permanent, it cannot be undone, and it belongs entirely to you. Guntonkenses have arrived for this person, not as a punishment you had to engineer, not as something you needed to pursue or wait anxiously for. The natural result of sustained deception and deliberate harm is always the same. The structures built on dishonesty become unstable, the connections maintained through manipulation begin to fracture, and the energy spent working against your path is energy that was never spent building anything real in their own life. That absence is now visible to them in ways they cannot explain away. But the heaviest part of their reckoning is not material. It is the relational understanding that has finally, fully arrived. They looked at you, they actually looked at what you were offering, the depth of love and loyalty and genuine partnership that was available to them, and they chose to control it rather than cherish it. They chose the feeling of power over the experience of being truly loved. And now they understand, with the specific clarity that only arrives when it is too late to act on it, that those two things are not interchangeable. You cannot manufacture the warmth of being genuinely loved by someone of your depth. There is no equivalent available anywhere else. They held something irreplaceable in their hands and made a series of deliberate choices to destroy it. They understood on some level, even in the middle of the conspiracy, that you were the one. You do not build that kind of calculated architecture around someone you consider ordinary. You do not invest that much sustained energy in keeping someone contained unless you recognize, somewhere beneath all the fear and wounding, that losing access to them is the worst possible outcome for you. The betrayal was as elaborate as it was precisely because they knew what they had, and they were too frightened of what genuine love would require of them to receive it honestly, Pete, so they tried to possess it instead. They tried to keep you close enough to benefit from your energy without ever becoming vulnerable enough to actually be loved by you. And now they are sitting with the full weight of that choice. Dot, 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 dot. If they had chosen differently, if at any of the pivotal moments they had chosen honesty over performance, growth over familiar pattern, genuine connection over control, you would have been there. Your love was that real, that committed, and that patient. They exhausted every last piece of it, through choices they made knowingly, over an extended period, while fully understanding what was at stake. Oh, that is not a minor grief. That is the kind of understanding that remakes a person or breaks them completely. Which direction it takes them is no longer your concern. The lesson is theirs to carry. The reckoning belongs entirely to them, and you are free. You carry a specific quality of energy, a magnetism, a way of drawing things toward you when you are fully aligned with yourself. You have probably always sensed it, even when you lacked the language to name it. You noticed the way certain doors would open when your energy was clean and unencumbered, the way opportunities seemed to find you rather than requiring you to hunt them down, the way your presence in a situation would shift things towards something better almost without effort. During the season of this person's influence, that quality went quiet. Things that should have been straightforward required far more effort and produced far less result. Momentum that had always felt natural became sluggish and difficult to sustain. And because it happened gradually, you absorbed the absence as evidence about yourself, as though the drought was a reflection of your worth, rather than a symptom of what was being done to your energy. You were not experiencing bad luck. You were experiencing a drain. The constant emotional labor of managing this person's unpredictability, the confusion they maintained around you, the anxiety of never knowing which version of them would show up, all of it was consuming the very resource that made you exceptional. Your energy was being pulled towards sustaining a dynamic that was designed to deplete you, and it was being pulled away from the life that was waiting for you to bring your full self to it. That drain is over. The moment the dynamic ended, the drawer on your energy closed. And what is happening now, what you can probably already feel beginning to stir in your life, is the return of everything that was held in waiting. Your natural flow is coming back, and it is coming back with force. The stability you have been reaching for, in your material world, in your sense of safety and groundedness, in your certainty that your foundation cannot be pulled out from under you, is arriving. Something was owed to you, something was redirected and delayed and interfered with, and the universe, which keeps precise accounts, is returning it now. What you receive in this next season will reflect not just what was taken, but everything that was held back across the entire period of interference. Delayed things do not simply arrive at face value. They arrive carrying everything they accumulated while they were waiting. The connections coming into your life now carry a completely different signature from what you experienced before. What is arriving is not dressed in performance. There is no calculated warmth designed to create dependence. What is coming toward you now is built on genuine resonance. It is the meeting of people who have done the inner work, who arrive from a place of wholeness rather than hunger, and who choose each other clearly rather than strategically. That is what was always waiting on the other side of the fire, not just the absence of the wrong thing, the full, real, inhabitable presence of the right thing. You are the dark horse. You are the one this person fundamentally underestimated, the one they looked at through the distorting lens of their own fear and saw as something manageable, something that could be kept contained and useful and just uncertain enough to never fully leave. What they failed to see, what they could not see because it required a level of self-awareness they had never developed, was that they were standing next to the most powerful force that would ever pass through their life. Dark horses do not make announcements. They do not need external validation to keep moving. They do the work in private. They heal when no one is watching. They develop in the seasons when others have written them off. And then they emerge, fully formed, undeniable, moving with a velocity and a grace that leaves everyone who bet against them simply standing in the wake of what passed. During the season of this person's influence, you were made to feel that your particular quality of being was a liability, too intense, too deep, too perceptive, too unwilling to fit the shape of what was comfortable for someone who needed to manage you. And the cruelest version of that diminishment was not the moments when it was said out loud. It was the sustained, quiet pressure that eventually made you wonder whether it might be true, although usually never true. Not for a single moment. You do not fit neatly into what is average, because you were never designed to occupy average space. The people who tried to reduce you to something comprehensible to them did so because the full scope of what you are exceeded their framework entirely. That is information about the limits of their perception. It has never been information about the limits of your worth. What this person tried to prevent is exactly what has now happened anyway. You have become the version of yourself they most feared existed beneath the surface, the version that does not require their approval or their presence to know its own value, the version that can look at the full truth of what was done and use the knowing as solid ground to stand on rather than as weight to collapse under. You were always going to arrive here. The path was harder and longer than it needed to be because of the interference, but the destination was never in doubt. You were made for this version of yourself, and now that you are standing fully inside it, nothing that operated on the old frequency can reach you anymore. There is a false narrative that needs to end today. It has been running quietly in the back of your mind, and it has done enough damage. It says that a more discerning version of you would have seen through this from the beginning, that trusting as deeply as you did was evidence of a flaw that needs correcting, that your love was in retrospect a mistake. None of that is true, not one word of it. Your love was never the mistake. Your love was the most accurate expression of your character that exists. You showed up fully and genuinely for another person. You did not withhold yourself as a hedge against potential loss. You did not love at partial capacity to protect your ego. You brought everything you had and offered it without conditions. That is not naivety. That is courage, and it is precisely the quality that makes you capable of the kind of love most people spend their entire lives searching for. The lesson is not to love less. The lesson is to direct that love with greater precision toward people who have demonstrated, through sustained and consistent action over time, that they are capable of receiving it without destroying it. You have that precision now. It was built inside you by the exact fire you just came through. It lives in your body. It lives in the part of you that immediately registers the difference between intensity and integrity, between someone who is drawn to your energy and someone who is willing to do the actual work of deserving access to it. And here is what I need you to sit with, because this is the specific truth at the heart of everything this message promises. This person came to understand too late, completely and without any path back, that you were their soulmate. Not the convenient or comfortable version, the real one. The person whose love would have genuinely changed the entire quality of their life if they had been brave enough to receive it honestly. They knew it while they were betraying you. You do not construct that level of deliberate architecture around someone you consider expendable. You do not invest that much sustained energy in keeping someone contained unless some part of you recognizes, beneath all the fear, that losing access to them is the worst thing that could happen to you. The power they chased was hollow from the beginning. Control is not warmth. Manipulation is not intimacy. Access is not love. And the specific absence they are living with now, the cold where your energy used to be, cannot be filled by anything else, because what you offered was not replaceable. They know that. The knowing without any path to change it is exactly the weight they will carry forward. That is their consequence. It is not yours to manage and not yours to mourn on their behalf. It is yours only to understand, so that you can finally stop carrying the question of whether any of it was real. It was real, you were significant, you were the one, and they chose wrong. Now, here is the final truth, the one the whole arc was building toward, the one this person is living with in the rubble of every choice they made. They knew you were the one, not suspected, knew, and they chose fear over you. They chose the hollow comfort of control over the terrifying beauty of being genuinely loved by someone of your depth. They chose to diminish you rather than rise to meet you, and the heaviest sentence in their entire chapter is simply this: they had everything. They held it in their hands. They looked directly at the life they actually wanted, the real love, the genuine partnership, the connection that would have changed the entire quality of their existence, and they were so frightened by the vulnerability it required that they destroyed it instead. That grief belongs to them completely. It is not yours to manage, not yours to mourn on their behalf, and not yours to keep revisiting in the hope that understanding it further will make it hurt less. The only thing that makes it hurt less is turning your full attention toward the extraordinary life that exists on your side of this divide. Lidjorm, you are the dark horse. They bet against you with everything they had. You Pyatt, well, now look at where you are standing. You are still here. You are whole. You are moving. And what is approaching you? The love, the stability, the aligned and genuine connections, the restoration of every single thing that was taken is arriving now, not someday, now, with the full momentum of everything that was held in waiting. They are in regret. You are in your renaissance. Those are two entirely different places to occupy. Stand in yours completely, without apology, without shrinking the scale of what you survived so that it is more comfortable for the people around you, without minimizing the magnitude of what you are becoming, or this was always where you were headed. Every painful, confusing, disorienting piece of the last season was part of the preparation for exactly this. The fire burned away everything that was not essential, and what remains is the purest, most powerful, most fully arrived version of you that has ever existed. Nothing is blocking the way anymore. Chosen one, absolutely nothing, or the turn toward what is coming. Open your hands and go.